Hey guys, this is Fred from Pretty Fly Games, and today we're going to continue with our top-down car controller built in Unity. Today we're going to add support for bridges and things that the car can either go over or under. I'll show you some neat tricks that you can use to make sure that the player can see the car even though it's under something. Okay, so let's get started with building this scene. So I prepared a scene which the car will be able to drive around like this, and the goal is to create a bridge here that the car can pass over and go under. But first we will add a tree that the car can go under. So let's drag the tree sprite into the scene, and then we will change the order in the sorting layer to 1 so that the car can pass under it. So if we take our car now, it should pass under the tree, like so. The bad part with this is that while the car is under the tree, we can't see it. So we want to have an option so that we can see something of the car even when it's behind something. So we will change something in the car so it works. And what we will do is we will open the car sprites here, and we will add a new sprite that I have already prepared. So let's go into sprites, and we have a car outlined. So let's drag that into the sprites. And we put it at position 0, 0. So this is an outline that we have of our car, and we will change the sorting layer of it to be on the particles, so it's always on top. So if we save this now and we have a look at our car and we go under the tree, then we can actually still see the car. There's a lot of trails, but you can see the car. So this makes it easier for the player to know where the car is even though it's under something. The bad part with this is that even when something is outside and you should clearly see it, you still see the outline. So there is a fairly easy way to fix this in Unity. So how we solve this is by using a sprite mask. So let's select the tree, add component, and type sprite mask. Then the sprite that we will be using is the tree sprite. So we add it here. And then we go to our car outlined. And let's open the prefab. So we change the prefab instead. And again, we change how it's rendered. So what we do is in this mask interaction, we say that it's visible inside the mask. So that means when the car is below the mask, then that outline will start to show. So if we take our car and we drive it slowly, we can see now that as it's passing over the tree, it becomes visible. And when it's exiting on the other side, the outline becomes invisible. Exactly like we wanted it. So that's an easy way for you to handle things that the car should be able to go under, but you still want to give the player an ability to see in what direction the car is facing and such. Okay, perfect. Now we will continue with the bridge. The bridge is slightly more complicated, but we will use the same technique. So we want to add a bridge that passes over here. And what we do is we select our grid, and we want to add a new tile map. The racetrack is already a tile map that goes around like this. If we disable it, we can see that it's the complete tile map. So we want to create another sort of layer or another tile map that can go over this. So we'll select our grid and we go into 2D object and we add a tile map. Now I've scaled up the grid already with size 4. So this becomes a little bit smaller. So let's change the scale into 1 instead. So now it's aligning properly with our grid. Then we go into Windows, 2D and Tile Palette. Oh, I have it on another screen. So let's bring it in and make it a bit smaller so we can work with it. Okay, so we want this track to continue, and what we can do is that we will look at, okay, we want to take a copy of this tile and we bring it into tile map and we can paint it, and then we rotate it and we paint the other side. Okay, so tile map is not a great name, so let's call it bridge. And if we disable it, we can see that, okay, yeah, this is rendering. So that's perfect. The problem right now is that they are on the same level. Racetrack is the sorting layer, and here we're using default, but we want to add a new sorting layer. So let's do that. So let's select our default or the sorting layer, press add, and let's add a new sorting layer. We call it racetrack overpass, and we will add it after default. Then we select our bridge and we change it to racetrack overpass, and we make it to -1 like we have on the racetrack. So they are the same now. So if we take our car and we drive it under the bridge, we can see that the car can now pass under it. However, we can't pass over it. So this does not work because the car is not changing any layers or anything like that. So let's change that. And what we need to do is add a trigger so that we can change the sorting layer. But before that, let's turn off our trail renderers so that we don't see them all the time. So it's easier for you to see what's going on. All right, so now they are off, and let's just clear the screen. Okay, so for the car to be able to pass over this, we need to change its sorting layer. And when the car is driving over this part, we need to have a trigger that tells the car that it should switch rendering layer. So we will add a 2D object, and we will add a sprite, and I like to use this. I have a white tiny sprite, and just change the Z value to 0. And then we can go in and we will drag it so it becomes covers the whole area. You can make it a little bit smaller, and let's just bring it down until that part. And then we add a box collider to it, and we will use isTrigger, and then we will create a new tag, and let's call this tag overpass trigger, and we save. Then we need to make sure that this tag is using it, and we will make it purple so it becomes very visible. I like to use sprites like this to well, give me a visual indication of what I'm doing, and we will just call it overpass trigger, and then we will do the same on the other side of the bridge. So if the car is passing from below, it hits the trigger and it changes the sorting layer, and then it goes over. So then the car can pass over from both sides. Then we will do the same thing, but for the underpass trigger. So let's move it a little bit above, put it here. We change the color into, let's say, yellow, and we create a new tag for it, and we call it underpass trigger, and let's assign it underpass trigger, and then we duplicate it and put it below. The important part here is that there is should be enough distance. So if the car is driving like this, and let's rotate it, so the car needs to fit between these two triggers so that it can't hit them at the same time like that, because that will cause a lot of problems for you. Then you can get duplicated events, and you don't really know if the car is under or below the bridge. Okay, so now we have created our trigger, and if the car is driving, it will first hit the underpass trigger, which will do nothing essentially. But if it hits the overpass trigger, this one, then we want it to change the sorting layer. So if we go into here and just to simulate it, we go into the car sprite and we change the sorting layer to racetrack overpass. So when it hits that trigger, it should change the sorting layer. And when it's driving, now we can see that it's driving above the bridge. And when it's hitting this second trigger, it will change the sorting layer again back to whatever it was before. So it will be in the default layer. And by doing that, the car will be able to go below the bridge. So by changing these sorting layers, we can fake a depth into the scene, which doesn't exist because it's a flat camera, but it fools the eye and makes it possible for us to add bridges and overpasses. So let's add a new class or a new script so we can program this. And also let's change this name from overpass trigger to underpass trigger so that we know what we're doing. So let's change that to underpass trigger, and this one too. Underpass. Okay, then we go into scripts and let's create a new script, and we'll call it car layer handler, and then we'll open it in Visual Studio. So in the car layer handler, we want to be able to control the sprites so that we can change the layers of the sprite. But in the car, we now have multiple sprites. We have the shadow, we have the outline, and we might add additional ones in the future. So let's use a list so that we can automatically collect all the sprite renders that exist. So we do this in the awake function like we have done before, where we collect things. Let's change the formatting. And what we do is we're going to run a for each loop. And what it does, we are taking the game objects and we are getting the components in its children. And this gets all the sprite renderers that is attached to our car. And we call the sprite renderer sprite renderer. So this is like a for loop. It loops through all of these children. And what we do is that we check if the sorting layer is the default already. And then we add it into our default layer sprite renderer list so that we can keep track of them. Then we will add a new variable called is driving on overpass. So it's a form of a state variable for us so that we can tell what is going on. And after that, we will add a trigger so that, or actually a detection when the car is entering a trigger. And let's do that by just adding this code. And we have on trigger enter like we used for the jump code. And we will check if it's an underpass trigger or if it's an overpass trigger. So if the trigger, the collider that has the trigger, has the tag underpass, then we change our variable to is driving on overpass is false. If it's hitting the overpass trigger, then we put the variable as is driving on overpass to true. Then we will add a new function called update sorting and collision layers. Let's make that into a capital letter. And we will do the same if it's hitting the overpass trigger. And let's add this as a function. And in this function, we want to do something if the car is driving on the overpass, or if it's driving on the underpass. And to keep things tidy, we will create a new function called set sorting layer. And we will make it into a void, and it should take in a parameter, and it will take in a string layer name. In the set sorting layer function, we will run through all of our sprite renderers that we have in our list that we created before, and we will change the sorting layer name to whatever is in the function. So when something is driving on the overpass, we want to change the sorting layer. So we call the set sorting layer with the name racetrack overpass. And if it's running on the underpass, we want to change the sorting layer to default. Okay, so let's save this and give it a try in Unity and see what happens. So first of all, let's assign the script to the car. And we'll open the prefab, and we have our car layer handler that we just created, and we'll assign it to the car, and then we go back and save, and then we press play, and hopefully it should now behave as we want it to. So if we're driving around here, now we are hitting the underpass trigger, which will cause the car to do nothing, but when we are hitting the overpass trigger, it changes the sorting layer. So now we are sorting the car's sprite. If we look at it, we can see that it has changed into racetrack overpass. And as we're driving away from the bridge, we're exiting the bridge, it hits this trigger, and then it changes the sorting layer to default. So now if we loop around, we can drive under this bridge, which is all great. But there is a problem. If we drive, for instance, like this, we will now be on the overpass, and we will drive above the bridge, and then we exit the bridge on the side, and now it will no longer go under the bridge. So what we want is we want to limit the player's ability to drive off the bridge on the sides, and we will change the behavior of this by adding a few colliders. Alright, oh, we have a small spelling mistake. Bridge. Okay, so let's add some graphics to it, and we'll add a tile map, or go into the tile palette, and we will add this bridge part, and we will rotate it, make sure that the active tile map is bridge, and then we put it over the side, and then we rotate it to fill it up on the other side like that. And then on these lower parts we want sides as well, but we'll put that on the racetrack instead. So let's change it into that one, and we'll use this graphics for that. Okay, perfect. Now to make this tutorial easy to follow, we will just add colliders on top of this. We could use the built-in features for tile map colliders and handle it that way, but I will do it in the traditional way just to make it easier to follow. So let's add a 2D object, and we'll just add a sprite, and we'll use our 64 white, and then we change the Z value, and we bring it on top here. And as we see, we can't really see the sprite, so let's change the sorting layer to racetrack overpass, and now we see it. So let's just make sure that this is green so we can see it a little bit better, and then let's change the size of the sprite to roughly cover the bridge part here, and we can bring it down like that. And let's call this bridge overpass collider. And let's duplicate it, or actually we can add a collider, box collider 2D to it. And yeah, it's already there. Let's turn on the gizmos so we can actually see it as well. Well, it's the same green color, so it's a little bit hard to see, but it's there. We'll create a new tag and we will call it overpass collider. Save, and then we will assign that to the object, and then we can duplicate the whole thing and put it on the other side. And then we do the same thing for the underpass collider. So bring it up here, call it bridge underpass collider, and let's change the, we need to add a new tag for it, underpass collider, and select it and change it to that, and let's change the size of this so it matches up a little bit better, roughly there. And then we duplicate the object and bring it to the, oops, duplicate object, bring it to the other side. It doesn't have to align perfectly, it's good enough. And then we need 2 more at the bottom as well. Like that. So if we now take the game for a spin, it will, the car will collide with the colliders, like that. So we can't drive under it anymore, but we can drive over it. So we need to change that in the code so it makes it possible for us to drive under the bridge when we are not on the overpass layer, and then when we are driving over the bridge, well, then we should hit this so that we don't fall off the bridge. So let's open up Visual Studio again and change this. So in the car layer handler, we will add a list of colliders, similar to as we did with the sprite renderers, and we want to cache them so the game runs faster at runtime. So when the function is or the game object is awaking, then we want to cache this. So we use the function find game objects with tag, which finds all overpass colliders, and we will then add it to our list. And then we do the same thing for the underpass colliders. Okay, perfect. Now, before we created this update sorting and collision layers, and we want to call that on the start so we know that the car has all the correct sorting. Okay, great. Then we also need to be able to keep track of the car's own collider. So let's add that, the collider 2D, and it's going to be called car collider. And then in our awake function, let's get that component and cache it like that. Okay, now let's go into the function update sorting and collisions layers, because this is where the magic will happen. But before we do that, we need to add a new function. Similar to this set sorting layer, we will have a new function that we call set collision with overpass. And actually it doesn't need to take anything in. And what we will do is that we will loop through all the colliders that we have in the overpass collider list. And we will use this built-in function, physics ignore collision between the car collider, and we will use if it's not driving on the overpass. So while it's driving on the overpass, we want it to collide with these colliders that are in overpass. But when we are passing under the bridge, then we don't want this collision. Perfect. Now the second part is we want to do the same thing, but for the underpass colliders, but in the opposite way. when we are driving on the overpass, we want to ignore all collision with any collider that is a part of the underpass collision list, and the reverse while it's not driving on this. Let's use this function in our update function here, and let's take it for a spin and see how it behaves in Unity. So if we drive our car now and we drive over the bridge, then we can't drive down from the bridge. The colliders are colliding. But if we drive under the bridge, then the colliders do not collide anymore. So now we have this sort of fully functioning way of changing sorting layers and also the collision layers. We do have a little bit of an edge case, and that is if you take your car and you drive it through this section, then all of a sudden it becomes, it moves into the overpass sorting layer, and the car thinks it's on top of it. So we want to avoid the player to have the ability to do this, and how we solve this is by adding a collider. So let's add a collider to stop this behavior. So let's take our underpass collider, let's duplicate it and bring it over here, and then we will change the size of it like that, and then we will bring it down so it aligns with this section of the track here. Something like that, and let's make it a little bit more smaller. There we go. And we already have the underpass collider here, and we will duplicate it again and bring it over to this side. It doesn't have to be perfect, it's just a rough estimate. And it's good if it's aligning with this other collider here. All right, something like that. And let's see, does it align? Yeah, let's bring it up a little bit. So if we take our car for a ride, now we can go over the bridge, we can go under the bridge, and we can't pass through this section here. And as you see, it's really hard to see where the car is going. So let's fix that part. And I actually did a little bit of a mistake. These colliders here, up and down on the lower part of the bridge, on the both sections, it shouldn't actually not be on the underpass collider. It just should be untagged. The car should always collide with this section, because otherwise when you are driving on the overpass and you turn around, then you can drive through it. It's only these sections that you should handle as underpass colliders. Okay, perfect. So let's handle this problem that you can't see the car. And if you remember it, we have the tree which has the sprite mask, and we need a sprite mask for the bridge. So let's go and create a 2D object, and we can create it as a sprite mask. And let's turn on our gizmos so we can see where we are, and we'll assign a sprite to it, and we'll use our 64 white. And then let's change the size of this to, well, the outside of this section here, like that, and like that. Okay, so now if we run the game again, let's call it bridge sprite mask, bridge sprite mask, and let's run it again. Now if we drive under the bridge, then the sprite mask works, and if we are driving above the bridge, then the sprite mask is also working. So that's not the behavior that we want. We want it only to work when we are driving under the bridge. So we need to change our code slightly for that to work. So let's go back into Visual Studio again. So let's scroll to the top of our car layer handler, and we will add the sprite renderer for the outline as a public variable. So we can assign it from the inspector. The car outline sprite renderer needs to be updated so it becomes visible when we are driving under the overpass, and it should be hidden when we are driving over the overpass. So let's find our layers that controls this, or our code that controls this. So in our update sorting and collision layers, when we are driving on the overpass, we want to set the car outline to be disabled. So we will just disable it. And when we are running below the bridge or anything else, we want it to be enabled. Like that. And if we save it and give it a try now, it should work much better. So let's open our car prefab, and we'll need to assign the car outline sprite in this slot here. So let's find the car outline sprite, and we assign it, and then we save, and then we take it for a spin. And now the outline should be hidden when we are driving above the bridge, and it should be visible when we are below the bridge. All right, perfect, it works. We can see the car, and it's driving well under the bridge, and we can see where it's going. So now that we have all of this code working, we can get rid of these temporary graphics and make it a little bit more pretty. So let's select all of our objects here, and we can remove the sprite renderers because we don't need them anymore. So we can see our nice bridge graphics. And let's also make the bridge into a proper object. So let's create an empty object. I like to center it on the middle of the screen, and then we drag all of these things into it so that we have control over it. Perfect. So there are a few things that we can do, and I've already done one thing. Is I've changed the color of the racetrack to be slightly darker, like you can see here, because darkness in 2D games makes something feel that it's sort of in a lower sorting layer. It has a shadow on it, and something that is bright, like this area here, makes it appear that it's above something. So we have a slight color change here, but we want this incline here to be a little bit darker, so we can get a feel that, yeah, there is something here that is different from this, because we want this to look like it's sloping slightly upwards. So we can fake that by adding a new 2D object. Let's call it a sprite. And we'll add our 64 white sprite. Let's move it here, and we call it fake shadow. And let's bring it up a little bit, and we'll make it 100% black, and bring it into center, and then we scale it so it covers this area here and this section, like that. Okay, and then we will want it to be in the racetrack area, or racetrack sorting layer. Okay. What we do now is let's line it a little bit better. We change the alpha value of this into something less, like that maybe, and then we duplicate our fake shadow, and we duplicate it, and we bring it down, so we have this fake section here. Now it looks like this section is different. It looks like, yeah, it looks like it's going slightly upwards, at least to me. Then let's do another fake shadow, and let's put it above the bridge, So let's put it into the racetrack overpass. Let's change the size slightly as well. And we'll put it like that. And then we will offset it a little bit. Alright, so we can move the shadow around a little bit to make it look as good as possible. You can of course round off the corners, and you get the point by using these sort of fake shadows. But I will leave it sort of like this for now. Maybe make it a little bit more narrow, like that. Okay, so now if we go into the game mode, we have one more small issue. So if I run the game in game mode, and I drive on top of the bridge and I drive under the bridge, so that's all working, but the trails behind the car, the sort of skid marks, is not working when you're on the bridge. And the reason is for this is that they are drawn actually behind the bridge. So if we go and look at the grid, we turn off the bridge, we can see that the tracks are actually being drawn but under the bridge. So we need to create a different system for our wheel renderers to solve this problem. And I will start by creating a set of new wheel renderers on the car. So let's open the prefab, and we will take them that we have, and we will duplicate them, and we will call real trail renderer, and we will change this to overpass. Overpass wheel trail renderer, and we will call this also overpass wheel trail renderer. Now we need to change the sorting mode of this, so we will bring up the menu and we will add a new sorting layer, and we will call it overpass skid marks, or maybe we'll do it reverse, skid marks overpass. We'll put it above the racetrack overpass, and we change these into using that skid marks overpass, and then we press save. Now we need to change how the wheel trail renderer also works, so that we know which is what. So let's open the script in Visual Studio. So looking at our code for the wheel trail renderer, we already know that it's being triggered by this code. When the tires are screeching, we're going to call this. So we need to change what type of trail renderer we are activating and deactivating. So the first thing we need to know is this a wheel renderer that should be rendering when the car is driving on the overpass or when it's driving on the underpass. So we add a public variable saying that is overpass emitter. Then we know that this is an overpass emitter or not. Then we need to get the information from the car layer handler if we're driving on an overpass or not. So let's go into that script, and we already have the internal state, which is driving on overpass, and it's a private variable, it's not public. So let's make it a function for that so we can safely share it, and we'll add it after the set sorting layer here, and we can then make a function so that we can return the state of this. And while we're at it, we can delete the update function because we don't need it. And update functions, even if there is no code in it, take a little bit of performance. All right, so let's go back into our wheel trail renderer handler. And in this, we need to change this logic a little bit. So first of all, we're gonna say that whenever we are updating, the first thing we are doing is that we are disabling all emitting. then we know that it doesn't matter if it's an overpass, trail renderer, or an underpass. It's gonna be disabled the first thing that happens when the function enters this part. Then we're gonna change this if statement a little bit. So if our car layer handler is saying that we are driving on the overpass, and if it is an overpass emitter, then we want to enable this. Oh yeah, it's red because I forgot to declare it as a component up here. So let's do that real quick, and we also need to fetch it, so let's do that. Alright, so if we are driving on the overpass and it's an overpass emitter, then we should emit. There is the other case as well. If we are not driving on the overpass and we are not an emitter, then, or not an overpass emitter, then we should also emit. Okay, so let's save that and go back into Unity. So let's select our overpass wheel trail renderers and scroll to our script, check this is overpass emitter, and then save. And then we will press play again and go into game mode. Alright, and now we can see that it is emitting when we are driving under, or in the, well, under the overpasses, and when we are driving on the overpasses it is also emitting like it should. Now let's take our beautiful tree here and let's make a prefab out of it. We should have done it way back before when we did it, so we can add a few more trees to our scene, maybe like that. Oh, duplicate it like so, rotate it a little bit, duplicate them again, and add them over here. Alright, save our scene. And that pretty much concludes our session with adding bridges and overpasses. The smoke is actually emitting as well if we're driving under the bridge, which I think is okay. But if it bugs you, you can fix that yourself and do it the same way as we did with the wheel trail emitters or wheel trail renderers. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and hit the subscribe button and of course the thumbs up if you like it. In the next video we will go through how to handle checkpoints and lap counting and stuff like that. So stay tuned for more. Here's an example from our game, Total Arcade Racing, which uses this component. You can find the game on Steam or Nintendo Switch. Please take it for a spin if you want to.